Welcome to this week's vlog. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Now, I think it was last week that if you're watching last week, you may remember, or if you didn't, you can go back and watch it. I showed you a picture that was a rose, but the rose was made up of all the Hebrew words from the biblical book Song of Songs, originally written in Hebrew, of course, and it was in form of a rose, sometimes a symbol of love. When one person offers a rose to another, it's a symbol of love. And that poem in the Bible, Song of Songs, is a love poem, and it features two people, a man and a woman, who apparently or obviously are deeply in love with each other. And I was using that as a demonstration or illustration in a service I took last Sunday morning, speaking to the children, but obviously to everybody who was there, about love, and linking that with the passage for the day from the Bible, from John chapter 12, the story where Jesus is at the home of Mary, Martha and Lazarus having a meal, and Mary pours this tremendously expensive perfume on the feet of Jesus. It's a way of expressing her utter devotion to him and her love for him. And I was talking, just as I was talking with the church and the children in particular, about the way that we can express our love to God and to one another. From the back of church walked a couple who'd been married only a couple of days earlier. And so as they walked in, I was talking about love and love for one another. The whole church burst out in applause and cheering as they walked in. I think they were a little bit embarrassed, but it was just great timing. If I'd organised it myself, I couldn't have got it better timing to illustrate the importance of love for God and love for each other. Now, linking in with that, the theme of love, 2 or 3 weeks ago, our vicar was preaching on that famous passage in Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth in chapter 13, sometimes known as the love chapter. Indeed, it's sometimes, or quite fairly regularly, I guess, read at wedding services. Expression of love. Paul talking about the qualities of love, the love that we find in God himself. And he's saying, basically, whatever we do, however we serve, if we give away all our money to the poor, or whatever it is, whatever commitments we make, if it's not done out of that love, then it's pretty worthless. It's really challenging. And I must confess this, that I thought to myself as I was hearing this sermon, I've heard this sermon so many times over the years, going back to my youth. I haven't counted obviously, but I must have heard it lots and lots of times, that sermon. What is there new to be said about it? And as I was thinking that, it was as if God placed into my mind the question, yeah, but what have you done about it? Do you live it out? Is it a reality in your life, that kind of love? And there's a story that Jesus told, one of many, about two house builders. One who built his house on the rock, a firm foundation. One who built his house on the sand. And so when the storms came, the house on the rock stood firm, but the house on the sand collapsed because it didn't have a strong foundation. Jesus says, the one who built on the rock is the one who hears my words and works them into their life. So it's not just about hearing the words that God speaks through the Bible, but how do we work them out in our lives? How do we put them into practice? And I found that thought really challenging, because let me read to you again. I'm sure you're familiar with that passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, some verses from there. This is what Paul writes. I may speak in different languages of people or of angels, But if I do not have love, I am only a noisy bell or a clanging cymbal. I may have the gift of prophecy. I may understand all the secret things of God and have all knowledge. And I may have faith so great that I can move mountains. But even with all these things, if I do not have love, then I am nothing. I may give away everything I have, and I may give even my body as an offering to be burnt. But I gain nothing if I do not have love. And then Paul goes on to describe what love is like. And it's not this emotional love that when we fall in love with somebody, but it's that love that God has for us, and he calls us to mirror in our lives. Love, says Paul, is patient. Well, that's a challenging one to start with. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. It does not brag, it is not proud. Love is not rude, it is not selfish. It does not get upset with others. Love does not count up wrongs that have been done. Love takes no pleasure in evil, but rejoices over the truth. Love patiently accepts all things. It always trusts, always hopes, and always endures. And then Paul finishes the chapter with these words. So these three things continue forever: faith, hope, love. And the greatest of these is love. So when I just thought back, as God gave me that question, put that question in my mind, how are you living it out? How are you putting it into practice? How are you working this into your life? I felt really challenged because I know that I'm not always patient. I'm not always kind. Sometimes I'm proud or rude or selfish. Sometimes I get upset with others, even with my lovely wife Sue. My prayer is that God, by his Holy Spirit, will grow these things in me more and more, so that love that God has for me and for each of us may be seen in me. Let's open our hearts to God's Spirit to work in us to create more and more of that love, that we might be a blessing to those we meet day by day. So that was a word that challenged me, and maybe it challenges you too. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.